I'm Carlos, 28, the invisible middle child, in a family that measured love by sacrifice and obedience. The night they changed the locks, they expected me to crumble, to come crawling back, begging for forgiveness. Instead, I walked away and built something they never thought possible, a life entirely my own. They never saw my potential, until it was too late, until their world started falling apart without me. Before I dive into how I rebuilt my life after my family kicked me out, let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to prove someone wrong who underestimated you. Growing up in the Martinez household meant living under a constant shadow of expectations. My parents, who immigrated from Mexico when I was just 3 years old, worked tirelessly to establish our family restaurant, Casa Martinez. Their journey was difficult, a fact they reminded us of daily. Every childhood complaint was met with stories of border crossings, initial poverty, and endless sacrifice. These stories weren't shared to inspire us, but to create an unrepayable debt. Our family dynamics were clear from early on. My older brother Miguel, 4 years my senior, was the golden child. As the firstborn son, he could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. He was being groomed to eventually take over the family business, receiving praise for the slightest effort. My younger sister Isabella, 5 years younger than me, occupied the role of the protected baby. Her mistakes were learning experiences, her achievements celebrated enthusiastically. And then there was me, Carlos, perpetually stuck in the middle. When I brought home straight A's, my father would ask why I wasn't in more advanced classes like Miguel had been. When I won second place in the regional science fair, my mother wondered aloud why I couldn't have gotten first. No matter what I achieved, it was never quite enough. By the time I turned 13, my role as the family scapegoat was firmly established. If something went wrong in the restaurant, I was blamed even when I wasn't working that day. When food supplies went missing, my parents assumed I had been careless with inventory, never considering that Miguel might have been the one mismanaging things. Working at Casa Martinez consumed my adolescence. While other kids played sports or joined clubs, I bussed tables, washed dishes, and eventually learned to cook. I received no payment beyond room and board. My labor was my contribution to the family. Miguel, despite his position as the heir apparent, worked fewer hours and received an actual salary. Isabella barely worked at all, her education deemed more important than mine. My father, Antonio, ran the restaurant like a dictator. He micromanaged everything, from the arrangement of tables to the exact amount of spice in each dish. His temper was legendary among staff, most of whom quit within months. Only family members and desperate workers remained long-term. When I suggested modernizing our ordering system from paper to digital, he exploded, calling me an ungrateful know-it-all who thinks he's too good for traditional ways. My mother, Elena, was the emotional enforcer. While my father ruled through fear and intimidation, she wielded guilt and manipulation with surgical precision. "After all we've sacrificed for you," was her constant refrain, followed by sighs and sometimes strategic tears. When I stayed up late teaching myself computer programming, she called it a selfish waste of time that took away from my family duties. There were moments that still sting when I recall them. When I was 16, I coded my first complete program, a simple inventory management system that could have helped our restaurant. I excitedly showed it to my parents, expecting at least mild interest. My father glanced at it for 10 seconds before pushing my laptop away and saying, "Computers are for people who can't work with their hands. In this family, we work with our hands." Miguel laughed. Isabella looked uncomfortable but said nothing. No one stood up for me. As I entered my 20s, the questions in my mind grew louder. Why was I pouring my life into a business where I would never be valued? Why did my siblings receive opportunities and recognition that I was denied? Most importantly, was this really all my life would ever be? I started taking online coding courses in secret, using the public library's computers when possible and my old laptop when the house was quiet. I discovered I had not just an interest, but a genuine talent for software development. The logical structures, problem solving, and creative aspects of coding gave me something I never found at Casa Martinez, a sense of accomplishment that no one could diminish. The restaurant continued to struggle despite my family's pretense that everything was perfect. Our competitors embraced online ordering, social media marketing, and modern management systems, while we remained stubbornly rooted in the past. I saw the declining numbers when I helped with bookkeeping, but my suggestions were always dismissed with some variation of, "You don't understand tradition," or "This is how we've always done things." As I approached my late 20s, the contrast between my hidden tech world and my visible restaurant life became increasingly stark. Online, I was respected in programming forums, my solutions upvoted, my insights appreciated. At home, I remained the family disappointment, the ungrateful son who didn't show proper deference to family traditions. Something had to give. I just didn't expect the breaking point would come quite so dramatically, or that it would ultimately lead to the best decision I ever made. The email that changed everything arrived on a Tuesday morning in March. I was prepping vegetables in the restaurant kitchen, my hands raw from the acidic juice of tomatoes, when my phone buzzed in my pocket. Glancing around to make sure my father wasn't watching, I quickly checked the notification. "We were impressed with your project submissions and would like to invite you for an in-person interview for the junior developer position at Horizon Tech." My heart nearly stopped. Horizon Tech was a growing startup in Austin, about 300 miles from our small town. I'd applied on a whim, never truly believing they'd be interested in a self-taught programmer with no formal education or professional experience. Yet here was the invitation, right on my screen. The interview was scheduled for the following Monday, a traditionally slow day at the restaurant, but still a work day. I spent the rest of my shift mentally rehearsing how I would approach my parents. Perhaps if I explained the opportunity carefully, emphasized the potential for better income that could help the family, they might understand. Deep down, I knew better, but hope is a persistent thing. That evening, I waited until after dinner, when my father was in a relatively good mood following a profitable weekend at the restaurant. My mother was clearing dishes, Miguel was checking inventory, and Isabella was texting friends under the table. "I have some news," I began cautiously. "I've been taking some online courses in my spare time, learning software development." My father looked up, his expression already darkening. "What spare time?" "You work for the family." "In the evenings, after shifts." "Anyway, there's this company in Austin called Horizon Tech, and they've invited me for an interview on Monday." The silence that followed was deafening. My mother stopped clearing dishes. Miguel looked up from his inventory sheet with raised eyebrows. Isabella actually put down her phone. "Austin?" My mother finally said. "That's hours away. You can't possibly go." "It's just for an interview," I explained. "I'd only need one day off. Monday is slow anyway, and—" "Ungrateful," my father interrupted, his voice dangerously quiet. "After everything we've done, after giving you a job, a roof over your head, food on your plate, this is how you repay us? By trying to abandon the family?" "I'm not abandoning anyone. It's just an interview, an opportunity to—" "To what?" Miguel jumped in. "To play with computers, while the rest of us do real work? Who do you think will cover your shifts?" "Me? I already manage most of the business while you just follow recipes." This was a blatant lie. Miguel spent more time flirting with waitresses than managing anything, but arguing would only make things worse. "I could help find someone to cover for me," I offered. "The restaurant isn't some job you can just find a replacement for," my mother said, her voice trembling with practiced emotion. "We are a family business. Family. Do you understand what that means? Your father and I didn't cross the border, didn't sacrifice everything, so you could abandon us for some American tech company." Isabella finally spoke up, but not in my defense. "Carlos, that's really selfish. You know how hard everyone works. You know Dad's back has been hurting. How could you even think about leaving right now?" The conversation spiraled from there. Every grievance, every perceived slight I'd ever committed, was dredged up as evidence of my selfishness and ingratitude. My father's face grew redder by the minute. My mother's manipulation more transparent. Miguel's accusations more outlandish. "The business is struggling as it is," my father finally thundered. "And you want to take off during a workday for some fantasy job you'll never get? You think you're special? You think you're better than this family? That's not what I—" "Let me make this very clear," he cut me off, standing up so suddenly his chair scraped loudly against the floor. "If you leave on Monday for this interview, don't bother coming back. This family has carried you long enough. It's time you decide where your loyalty lies." My mother gasped at the ultimatum, but didn't contradict him. Miguel smirked. Isabella looked down at her plate. In that moment, something crystallized within me. I saw with perfect clarity that nothing would ever change. I would always be the scapegoat, the unappreciated workhorse, the disappointment. No achievement would ever be enough. No sacrifice would ever be recognized. "I understand," I said quietly. They mistook my calm for surrender. My mother's shoulders relaxed slightly. My father nodded curtly, considering the matter settled, but they had miscalculated. What they saw as submission was actually the most profound decision of my life. Over the next few days, I said nothing more about the interview. I worked my shifts, kept my head down, and secretly prepared. I transferred my meager savings to a new bank account they couldn't access. I packed a single backpack with essential clothing and personal documents. I downloaded coding references and practice problems to my laptop. On Sunday night, I left a note on my bed explaining that I would be attending the interview and understood the consequences. I thanked them for what they had given me and apologized for not being the son they wanted. Then I silently left before dawn on Monday, catching the first bus to Austin. The interview went well better than I expected. The team at Horizon seemed genuinely impressed by my self-taught skills and the personal projects in my portfolio. I felt valued in a way I never had at Casa Martinez. For the first time, my ideas weren't dismissed but engaged with seriously. When I returned to my hometown that evening, I wasn't surprised to find the locks changed. Through the windows, I could see my belongings haphazardly packed in trash bags on the front porch. My key no longer worked in the restaurant's service entrance either. They had actually done it. After 28 years, my family had thrown me away over a single job interview. As I stood there in the growing darkness, a text message arrived from my mother. "When you're ready to apologize properly and recommit to the family, call us." They expected me to break, to beg, to realize I couldn't survive without them. They were wrong. The Best Western Motel on the edge of town became my temporary home. At $89 per night, my savings wouldn't last long, but it gave me a clean bed and reliable Wi-Fi while I figured out my next steps. That first night, sitting on the stiff floral bedspread under harsh fluorescent lighting, reality hit hard. I was truly alone for the first time in my life. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from family members, each one designed to pull me back into the fold. My mother alternated between guilt trips. "I cried all night thinking about you out there alone," and dire predictions. "You'll come crawling back when you run out of money." My father sent just one text. "Your choice, your consequences." Miguel was more direct. "Way to abandon the family that gave you everything. Real classy, bro." Isabella's messages hurt the most. "How could you do this to Mom and Dad? They're devastated. Please just come home and apologize." I didn't respond to any of them. They weren't interested in dialogue, only in my surrender, and returned to my assigned role in the family system. Instead, I focused on the one positive thread in my life. Horizon Tech had responded enthusiastically to my interview and invited me for a second round. The technical assessment was scheduled for Wednesday, just 2 days away. I spent every waking hour preparing, reviewing coding concepts, practicing problems, and researching the company. When not actively studying, I scoured rental listings in Austin, calculating budgets, and trying to figure out how I could make this work financially. Wednesday arrived, and the second interview was even more intense than the first. For 4 hours, I wrote code, explained my thought processes, and collaborated with potential future colleagues on hypothetical projects. The lead developer, a woman named Rachel, with electric blue hair and an intimidating intellect, pushed me harder than anyone ever had, not to break me, but to see what I was truly capable of. "Your formal education is obviously lacking," she told me bluntly toward the end. "But your problem-solving approach is interesting. You find unconventional solutions, probably because you weren't taught the correct way to do things. That can be valuable in the right environment." As I waited for the bus back to my hometown, my phone continued to fill with family messages. Their tone was shifting slightly, from anger to confusion that I hadn't yet returned to apologize. They genuinely couldn't conceive of a world where I could function without them. My mother's latest text read, "The restaurant is very busy. We need you back. This has gone on long enough." They still didn't understand. This wasn't a negotiation tactic or a temporary rebellion. This was me finally choosing myself. On Thursday, with my motel funds dwindling, I received an unexpected message on a programming forum from someone named Nathan who worked at Horizon. We'd chatted briefly after my second interview, heard through the grapevine that the team was impressed. "Decision still pending, but I know you mentioned housing concerns. I have a spare room if you need a temporary place while getting settled. No pressure, just an option." This random act of kindness from a virtual stranger moved me deeply. In my entire life, my family had never offered me the kind of uncomplicated support this near stranger was extending. I accepted gratefully, arranged to sublease his spare room for a fraction of market rate, and booked a one-way bus ticket to Austin for Saturday. On Friday morning, the call came from Horizon's HR department. "We'd like to offer you the junior developer position," the recruiter said. "The starting salary is $62,000 per year with benefits. When can you start?" I nearly dropped the phone. The amount was more than I could have imagined, more than 3 times what my brother made at the restaurant. For the first time in my life, I negotiated for myself, mentioning my strong performance on the technical assessment. They came back with $65,000. I accepted immediately and agreed to start the following Wednesday. That evening, I celebrated alone at a small diner, ordering a slice of chocolate cake with my budget-conscious dinner. The waitress, seeing my obvious good mood, asked what I was celebrating. "I got a job," I said, the words feeling strange and wonderful. "A real job, with a salary and benefits. And I'm moving to Austin tomorrow." "Good for you, honey," she said with a genuine smile. "Sometimes you gotta leave to grow." Her simple words of encouragement meant more than she could know. As I packed my few belongings that night, my phone rang. It was my mother. After nearly a week of ignored texts, she was trying a direct call. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Carlos?" Her voice was soft, using the tone reserved for extracting maximum guilt. "It's been almost a week. This little rebellion has gone on long enough. Your father is willing to forget this happened if you come home now and commit to the restaurant properly." "Mom, I'm not coming back. I got a job in Austin. I'm moving tomorrow." The silence stretched for several seconds. "A job? What kind of job could you possibly get? You have no degree. No real experience. Don't be ridiculous. It's a tech position. Software development. The salary is more than Miguel makes." Another long pause. I could almost hear her recalculating her approach. "Well, that's good, Carlos. You can send money home to help the restaurant until you're ready to come back." And there it was. No congratulations. No pride in my achievement. Just an immediate assessment of how my success could serve the family system. "I won't be coming back, Mom, and I'll need my salary for myself while I get established. After everything we've done for you?" Her voice rose. "This is how you repay family? By abandoning us when we need you? Taking this job is a mistake. They'll fire you when they realize you don't know what you're doing, and then what? You think you can come crawling back here? I have to go, Mom. Goodbye." I hung up and turned off my phone. The next morning, I boarded the bus to Austin with one backpack, one duffel bag, and an overwhelming sense of both terror and freedom. I was 28 years old, and for the first time, I was choosing my own path. Austin welcomed me with its eclectic energy and endless possibilities. Nathan, my new roommate and unexpected first friend in this journey, picked me up from the bus station in his beat-up Honda Civic. With wild red hair and a t-shirt proclaiming semicolons matter, he looked exactly like the kind of person who would offer a spare room to a desperate programmer he barely knew. "Welcome to Weird City," he said, grabbing my duffel bag and tossing it in his trunk. "Hope you like tacos, live music, and people who think they're way more unique than they actually are." His apartment was small but comfortable, located in a complex populated primarily by other tech workers and graduate students. My room was barely bigger than the bed it contained, but after a week in a motel it felt like luxury. Most importantly, it was mine, a space where no one would barge in with criticism or demands. "House rules are simple," Nathan explained. "Clean your own dishes, replace toilet paper if you use the last of it, and never ever touch my coffee beans. Everything else is negotiable." Starting at Horizon Tech brought a wave of new challenges. The first day was a blur of paperwork, introductions, and technical onboarding. I met my team, received a shiny new laptop, and was assigned my first tasks. The corporate culture shock was real. After years of my family's hierarchical structure, Horizon's collaborative environment felt almost anarchic. People questioned their managers openly. Junior employees suggested improvements without fear. Ideas mattered more than status. My first week passed in an anxious haze as I waited for someone to realize I didn't belong there. But instead of criticism, I received patient guidance. Instead of being punished for mistakes, I was encouraged to learn from them. When I stayed late to finish a task, my team lead, Julia, actually told me to go home and rest. "The code will still be broken tomorrow," she said with a gentle smile. "Burnout doesn't help anyone. We need you fresh." The concept was revolutionary to me. In my family's restaurant, exhaustion was worn as a badge of honor. Here, sustainable work was valued over martyrdom. As weeks turned into months, I developed new routines. Morning coffee at the neighborhood cafe where the barista learned my name and order. Evening walks along the river trail, watching kayakers and stand-up paddleboarders glide by. Weekend explorations of the city's neighborhoods, each with its distinct personality. I learned to cook for myself, starting with simple pasta dishes and gradually attempting more complex recipes. I did my own laundry, paid my own bills, and managed my own schedule. Each of these mundane tasks felt significant proof that I could function independently despite my family's predictions of failure. Meanwhile, through mutual friends and distant relatives, news of the restaurant's troubles trickled in. Without my unpaid labor, Casa Martinez was struggling. They'd been forced to hire 2 part-time workers to cover my former responsibilities, cutting significantly into their profits. My father was working longer hours, his health beginning to suffer. My mother was back to waiting tables, something she hadn't done in years. I felt conflicted about these developments. On one hand, a small, petty part of me felt vindicated. On the other, years of conditioning made it difficult to shake the sense that their struggles were somehow my fault, my responsibility. My first real project at Horizon involved redesigning part of their inventory tracking system, ironically similar to what I'd tried to create for my family's restaurant years ago. This time, my ideas weren't dismissed, but built upon. In team meetings, senior developers asked for my input, When I suggested an innovative approach to a particularly tricky problem, the lead architect actually implemented it and credited me in the documentation. "Nice work, Martinez," he said in the next meeting. "That saved us at least 20 hours of workarounds." The simple acknowledgement nearly brought me to tears. After a lifetime of having my contributions ignored or minimized, being recognized felt almost uncomfortable, like clothes that fit properly after years of wearing hand-me-downs. With my first paycheck, I bought a proper bed frame and mattress for my room. With my second, I upgraded my ancient laptop. By the third month, I had saved enough to start looking for my own apartment. Nathan had been the perfect transitional roommate, but I craved a space that was completely mine. I found a small studio in East Austin, nothing fancy, but with large windows that filled the space with morning light and a small balcony where I could drink coffee and watch the city wake up. The day I signed the lease, I felt a surge of accomplishment that rivaled landing the job itself. My social circle expanded gradually. Nathan introduced me to his friends, most of whom also worked in tech. I joined a recreational soccer league, something I'd always wanted to try but never had time for while working at the restaurant. I downloaded dating apps and went on awkward first dates that sometimes led to good conversations, if not romantic connections. Then I met Sophia at a tech meetup focused on design and user experience. With dark curly hair, bright green eyes, and a quick laugh, she captivated me immediately. As the lead graphic designer for a local marketing firm, she understood the tech world without being immersed in it the way my coworkers were. Our first date lasted 5 hours, conversation flowing effortlessly from professional challenges to childhood dreams to favorite taco trucks. "You seem surprised when people listen to you," she observed over dessert. "You have this look of mild shock whenever I ask follow-up questions about something you've said, like you're not used to being heard." Her perception was unsettling but accurate. "Family dynamic," I explained vaguely. "Middle child syndrome." She nodded thoughtfully. "Well, I'm listening now." As summer turned to fall, my life developed rhythms entirely different from my existence back home. Weekdays were filled with coding challenges and team collaborations. Weeknights often included dinner with Sophia or drinks with coworkers. Weekends meant exploring Austin's endless events, or sometimes just quiet mornings reading on my balcony. The first major holiday away from family Thanksgiving loomed as a psychological hurdle. Sophia invited me to join her family's celebration, but I declined. I needed to prove to myself that I could be alone on a family holiday without collapsing into regret or loneliness. Instead, I volunteered at a community dinner for people without places to go, then returned to my apartment and called my grandmother, the only family member who had reached out supportively since my departure. She updated me on family gossip, including the concerning news that the restaurant was now closed on Mondays due to staffing issues and declining business. "Your mother won't admit it," she said in her straightforward way, "but they're struggling without you. Not just the work you did, but your ideas. The world is changing, and they refuse to change with it." As the new year approached, I received an unexpected promotion to mid-level developer after my inventory system modifications resulted in significant efficiency improvements company-wide. The accompanying raise allowed me to start paying off the student loans for the computer science degree I had secretly started taking online courses toward. My family made one last attempt to pull me back into their orbit just before Christmas. My mother called, her voice uncharacteristically subdued. "We're having a small family dinner on Christmas Eve," she said. "Just us. We'd like you to come." "Is this an invitation or a summons?" I asked, surprised by my own boldness. Her pause was telling. "Carlos, don't be difficult. It's Christmas. Family should be together. Will Dad apologize for throwing me out? Will Miguel acknowledge that I was doing more than my share at the restaurant? Will anyone actually be happy to see me? Or will I just be expected to slip back into my old role? Why must you make everything so complicated? Just come home. The restaurant needs you." And there it was, not "we miss you," but "the restaurant needs you." Not "I love you, but come back to work." "I'm sorry, Mom. I have plans in Austin. The plans were just Chinese takeout and a movie with Sophia, but they were mine, and they were real. As I hung up the phone, I realized something important. I no longer felt guilty. The invisible chains that had bound me to my family's expectations had finally broken. I was building something they had never given me permission to imagine. A life based on my own choices, values, and desires. And surprisingly, it was working. Spring brought cherry blossoms to the park near my apartment, and unexpected news from my hometown. My cousin Javier, always the family gossip, called one evening with updates he knew I wouldn't get directly from my immediate family. Casa Martinez is in serious trouble, Carlos, he said without preamble. They're now closed Mondays and Tuesdays, and they've cut lunch service entirely. The restaurant my parents had poured their lives into was contracting, shrinking like a deflating balloon. According to Javier, my brother Miguel had made several catastrophic business decisions. First, he'd invested in expensive kitchen equipment they didn't need while ignoring the outdated point-of-sale system. Then he'd alienated their produce supplier by repeatedly paying late, forcing them to source ingredients from the more expensive local market. Your father won't admit it, Javier continued, but they made a huge mistake pushing you out. Miguel talks big but doesn't understand the business the way you did. Meanwhile, at Horizon Tech, I was thriving. My redesigned inventory system had become the foundation for a new product line, earning me recognition throughout the company. My team lead, Julia, had begun mentioning future leadership opportunities, and I was taking management training courses in preparation. Sophia and I had settled into a comfortable relationship. She understood my reluctance to discuss family in detail but provided unwavering support when memories occasionally ambushed me. When I told her about Casa Martinez's troubles, she offered sympathy without feeding my guilt. Their business decisions aren't your responsibility, she reminded me. They chose this path when they decided your worth was measured only by your service to them. In late April, Isabella announced her engagement to her college boyfriend Thomas. The wedding was scheduled for June, a rushed timeline that raised eyebrows among extended family. My invitation arrived, addressed simply to Carlos Martinez with no mention of a +1 despite everyone knowing about Sophia. The slight was deliberate, a reminder that I remained an outsider. I sent a polite decline along with a generous gift card to a home furnishing store. Isabella texted almost immediately. Really? You won't even come to my wedding? Way to be selfish again. I stared at the message, recognizing the familiar pattern of family manipulation. Once, this would have sent me spiraling into guilt and self-doubt. Now, I could see it clearly for what it was, an attempt to control through shame. I wish you and Thomas every happiness, I replied. But I won't attend an event where my partner isn't welcome and where I'll be treated as an outsider in my own family. She didn't respond. The wedding came and went without me. Photos appeared on social media, showing my parents beaming proudly. Miguel giving a best man speech, the small restaurant reception with familiar faces. I felt a pang of something not quite regret, but acknowledgement of loss. These were moments I would never share, connections that had been severed. Summer brought my first full year at Horizon Tech, and with it, a performance review that exceeded all expectations. My salary increased again, and I received a substantial bonus for my contributions to the inventory system. I used part of it to make the final payment on my car, a modest used Toyota. But the first vehicle that was truly mine. Then came the news that my father had been hospitalized with chest pains. My mother's voicemail was terse. Your father is in the hospital. Heart attack scare. Just thought you should know. No request to visit. No update on his condition. Just the bare minimum information delivered in a tone that suggested even this much was a courtesy I didn't deserve. I called the hospital directly and spoke with his doctor, who confirmed it was not a heart attack but severe angina caused by stress and overwork. The recommended treatment included rest, medication, and a significant reduction in working hours, something nearly impossible for a man whose identity was entirely wrapped up in his struggling restaurant. That evening, I received the first direct contact from my brother in over a year. The text was brief, but shocking in its directness. Restaurant might not make it through winter. Dad can't work full shifts anymore. Not sure what we're going to do. No accusation, no blame. Just simple facts delivered with what seemed like genuine concern. I sat on my balcony for hours that night, watching the Austin skyline and thinking about cycles of family pain. My parents had sacrificed everything to build Casa Martinez, pouring their dreams and identity into its walls. They had demanded the same absolute dedication from their children, unable to conceive of fulfillment outside the family business. The next morning I did something I never thought I would. I sent money home. A cashier's check for $5,000 with a simple note. For Dad's medical expenses. No strings attached. My mother called 3 days later. "We received your check," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "How's Dad doing?" "Better. Resting. The doctor says he can only work 4 hours a day for now." An awkward silence stretched between us. "The money," she finally said. "It helps. Thank you." Coming from her, these words were seismic. I couldn't remember the last time she had thanked me for anything without immediately following it with a new demand. "You're welcome," I said simply. "The restaurant," she began, then stopped. "We're having trouble. Miguel tries. But the unspoken acknowledgement hung in the air between us. Miguel, the golden child, wasn't capable of saving the family business. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, meaning it despite everything. "Your job," she said hesitantly. "It's going well?" "Very well. I was promoted again. I lead a small team now." Another pause. "That's good. Your father would never say it, but that's good." It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even a full acknowledgement of how wrong they had been. But from my mother, it was something close to validation, and I found myself unexpectedly moved. The conversation ended soon after, neither of us quite knowing how to bridge the chasm that had formed. But something had shifted, however slightly. 2 weeks later, my phone rang with Miguel's number, the first actual call from him since I'd left. "Carlos," he said, his voice lacking its usual arrogance. "Got a minute?" "Sure," I replied cautiously. "I messed up," he said bluntly. "The restaurant is failing, Dad's health is shot, and I don't know how to fix any of it. I know I've been a jerk to you forever. I know I took credit for your work and treated you like crap. But I'm asking, just talking, not for Dad or Mom. What would you do to save this place?" His vulnerability was so unexpected that at first I thought it might be a manipulation tactic. But as he described the restaurant's specific problems, outdated systems, declining customer base, staff retention issues, his sincerity became clear. He was genuinely asking for my help, professional to professional. For over an hour, I outlined steps they could take. Implementing an online ordering system, refreshing the menu while maintaining classic favorites, establishing a social media presence, creating a loyalty program. Basic business adaptations that I had suggested years ago and been mocked for. "This all makes sense," Miguel said when I finished. "I should have listened to you back then. We all should have." It was the closest thing to an apology I had ever received from him. "It might be too late," he admitted, "but I'm going to try. And Carlos? I'm sorry, really, for everything." As I hung up, I realized I was smiling. Not because I took pleasure in their struggles, but because something fundamental had changed. For the first time in my life, my family was seeing me, really seeing me for who I was and what I could contribute. It had taken my absence and their decline for this recognition to come, but it had finally arrived. Meanwhile, my own life continued its upward trajectory. Sophia and I began discussing moving in together. Horizon Tech featured my work in their company newsletter. I registered for my first in-person college course, taking a step toward the degree I had always wanted. I was building something my family had never thought possible. A life entirely my own, defined by my choices rather than their expectations. And somehow, Paradoxically, it was only in establishing this separation that any genuine connection with them became possible. Fall in Austin brought cooler temperatures and exciting developments at Horizon Tech. Our CEO announced a major expansion into enterprise software solutions, and I was tapped to lead the development of a key component. My team doubled in size overnight, and suddenly, I was responsible for coordinating the work of 8 other developers, including several with more formal education than me. "Why me?" I asked Julia during the transition meeting. "There are more experienced people available." "Because you see patterns others miss," she replied matter-of-factly. "And because you know how to navigate difficult personalities without creating unnecessary drama. That's rare and valuable." The irony wasn't lost on me. Growing up as the family scapegoat had forced me to become exquisitely attuned to emotional undercurrents and conflict management skills that were now advancing my professional career. The project consumed my days and many evenings. We were building something revolutionary, an inventory and supply chain management system that could predict potential disruptions before they occurred. The work was challenging and deeply satisfying, drawing on both technical skills and the practical experience I'd gained, watching my family's restaurant struggle with these exact issues. As my professional responsibilities grew, so did my relationship with Sophia. After months of practically living at each other's apartments, we decided to make it official. We found a 2-bedroom condo with a small yard in a neighborhood filled with coffee shops and local businesses. Moving day involved a small army of friends from work and Sophia's social circle, another reminder of the community I'd built in my new life. "Never thought I'd see the day when you owned more books than tech equipment," Nathan joked as he helped unload my collection of programming references, business texts, and the fiction I'd discovered I enjoyed. "Growth mindset," I replied with a grin. That evening, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes and takeout containers, Sophia raised her beer bottle in a toast. "To new beginnings," she said, "and to the man who rebuilt himself from scratch. I'm so proud of you, Carlos." Her words touched something deep within me. Pride had been in short supply in my family. Criticism flowed freely. Praise was rationed like water in a drought. Hearing someone express genuine pride in me, not for what I could do for them, but for who I was becoming, felt like a gift I was only now learning to accept. In November, I received an unexpected invitation to speak at a regional tech conference about the predictive algorithm we'd developed. Public speaking had always terrified me, another legacy of family dynamics, where speaking up often invited criticism, but with Julia's encouragement and Sophia's patient assistance with practice sessions, I accepted the challenge. Standing on stage before 300 industry professionals, I presented our work clearly and confidently. The questions afterward were engaged and thoughtful. Several attendees approached me later for deeper discussions. A tech journal representative asked for an interview. "You're becoming something of a rising star," my CEO commented at the company holiday party. "Keep this trajectory, and we'll be talking about more than just team leadership in your future." Meanwhile, news from home arrived in irregular bursts. Casa Martinez had officially reduced its hours to dinner service only, Wednesday through Sunday. My father's health had stabilized, but remained precarious. Isabella was pregnant, expecting a baby boy in the spring. These updates came primarily through my grandmother and cousin Javier, as direct communication with my immediate family remained minimal. Then, 2 days before Christmas, the call I'd been half expecting finally came. My mother's voice was tight with strain and something else, perhaps humility. "Your father's back in the hospital. Collapsed at the restaurant. The doctor says it's serious this time, his heart. We're not sure when he'll be released, if." Her voice cracked. "Carlos, I know we have no right to ask, but if you could come, just for a day or two, it would mean so much to him, to all of us." 24 hours later, I was on a flight back to my hometown for the first time since leaving. Sophia had insisted on coming with me, despite my warnings about family tension. "That's exactly why I'm coming," she'd said firmly. "No one should face this alone." The small regional hospital was a place of ghosts. I'd been there for various minor emergencies throughout childhood, always with my mother's anxious hovering and my father's impatience with weakness. Now, walking through the antiseptic corridors, I felt like two versions of myself, the boy who had never been enough and the man who had built a life beyond those limitations. My mother was in the waiting area, looking smaller and older than I remembered. She rose unsteadily when she saw me, eyes widening slightly at the sight of Sophia beside me. "Carlos," she said, stepping forward hesitantly. "You came." "Of course I came," I replied. "How is he?" "Stable now. They're saying heart failure, early stages. Manageable with medication and lifestyle changes, but—" She gestured helplessly. "You know your father." I did know him stubborn, proud, incapable of admitting vulnerability. The same traits that had made him successful as an immigrant building a business had become liabilities in facing health challenges. "Can we see him?" I asked. She nodded, then glanced questioningly at Sophia. "This is Sophia," I said simply. "My partner." My mother's lips tightened briefly, then relaxed into something resembling a polite smile. "Nice to meet you," she managed. My father's hospital room was dimly lit, machines beeping softly in the background. He looked diminished against the white sheets, his usually commanding presence reduced by illness and age. His eyes were closed when we entered, but opened as I approached the bed. Recognition, surprise, and something unreadable flickered across his face. "Carlos," he said, his voice raspy but still carrying that note of authority I remembered so well. "Dad," I replied, suddenly unsure what to do with my hands, my body, my presence in this space. "You look—" He paused, studying me. "Different. It's been nearly 2 years." He nodded slightly, his gaze shifting to Sophia. I introduced her briefly, and he acknowledged her with a nod before his attention returned to me. "The restaurant," he began. "Of course. Even here, even now, the restaurant came first. Some things never changed. Miguel told me about the challenges," I said neutrally. "We're losing it," he admitted, the words seeming physically painful for him. "Everything we built, everything we sacrificed for." There it was, the familiar refrain of sacrifice, the implicit accusation. But something was different this time. His tone lacked the usual weaponized guilt. He wasn't wielding family obligation like a club. He was simply stating a fact, tinged with genuine grief. "I'm sorry," I said, meaning it. "I know how much it means to you." A heavy silence filled the room. Then, unexpectedly, he reached for my hand. His palm was dry and papery against mine. "I was wrong," he said, each word deliberate. "About you, about what you could do. Miguel told me about your success. Your mother showed me the article online about your work. You found your path." I stared at him, momentarily speechless. In all my imagined scenarios of reuniting with my father, I had never pictured this raw acknowledgement, this recognition. I did. I finally managed. "It hasn't been easy, but I'm doing well." "Good," he said simply. "That's good, son." Son. Not Carlos, not ungrateful, not disappointment. Son. We talked for nearly an hour. Careful conversation that skirted the deepest wounds, but acknowledged their existence. He asked about my work, listening with genuine interest rather than dismissive judgment. I inquired about his treatment plan and what the doctors recommended. As visiting hours ended, he said something that stayed with me long afterward. Sometimes we hold too tightly to what we think matters, and miss what actually does. In the corridor outside his room, I encountered Miguel, haggard and unshaven, coffee cup clutched like a lifeline. "You actually came," he said, surprise evident in his voice. "He's still my father," I replied. Miguel nodded slowly. "I really messed things up, Carlos. The restaurant, everything. I always thought running the place would be my birthright, you know? Turns out, I'm terrible at it." The admission was so honest, so devoid of his usual bravado, that I found myself responding with equal candor. It's a hard business. And you were set up with impossible expectations, not like the ones they put on you, he countered. I was the golden boy who could do no wrong, so I never actually learned to do anything right. You were criticized constantly, but somehow learned everything that mattered. His insight was surprisingly perceptive. Perhaps crisis had granted him clarity I hadn't thought him capable of. Later that evening, at the hotel Sophia and I had checked into, I found myself unexpectedly emotional. "They're seeing me," I explained when she asked what I was feeling. "Really seeing me. Maybe for the first time ever. It shouldn't matter anymore. I've built this whole life without their validation, but somehow it still does." "Of course it matters," she said gently. "They're your family. The fact that you built a life without them doesn't mean you wanted to. It means you had to." Her understanding was a balm for complicated emotions I was only beginning to process. The next day brought a family dinner at Miguel's house, an awkward, tentative affair with Isabella and her husband Thomas joining us. My sister's pregnancy was evident now, her hands often resting protectively on her rounded belly. She remained coolly distant at first, but gradually thawed as the evening progressed. "The nursery is almost ready," she mentioned during dessert. Would you like to see it?" The olive branch was small but significant. As she showed me the carefully prepared room with its space-themed decor, she said quietly, "I want my son to know his Uncle Carlos. The real you, not the family stories." "I'd like that," I replied, genuinely moved. By the time we prepared to return to Austin, subtle but important shifts had occurred. No magical reconciliation, no dramatic, tearful embraces, just small acknowledgments of harm done and possibilities for a different kind of relationship moving forward. My mother hugged me goodbye with uncharacteristic gentleness. "You've built something good," she said. "I'm trying to understand that your path isn't ours, but it's still worthy of respect." From her, this was monumental. On the flight home, Sophia squeezed my hand. "You okay?" "I think so," I said thoughtfully. "It's not fixed. Maybe it never will be completely. But it feels like something important has shifted. They finally see what I've always seen in you," she replied simply. Back in Austin, life resumed its rhythm, but with subtle differences. Weekly check-in calls with my mother became part of my routine. Brief text exchanges with Miguel about business concepts and restaurant industry trends developed. My father's recovery progressed slowly, but steadily. In February, I received an unexpected email from Isabella, wondering if you and Sophia might consider being godparents to baby James when he arrives. Think about it. No pressure. That same week, Horizon Tech announced internal promotions. My name appeared on the list as the new director of product development, a senior leadership role with significantly expanded responsibilities and compensation. As spring approached, I found myself contemplating a step I hadn't previously considered possible: proposing to Sophia. We'd discussed marriage in abstract terms, but now I began researching rings, planning scenarios, imagining our future together. One evening, as we walked along the river trail we'd explored countless times, Sophia asked a question that caught me off guard. "Would you want your family at our wedding? If we get married someday, I mean." I considered carefully before answering. A year ago, I would have said absolutely not. Now, I think I would. Not to recreate some fantasy of perfect family harmony, but because they're part of my story. The good and the bad. She nodded, seemingly satisfied with my answer. Little did she know that in my pocket was the ring I'd purchased the previous week, along with dinner reservations for the following Saturday at the restaurant where we'd had our first date. My life had expanded in ways I couldn't have imagined that night I stood before my family home with changed locks and packed belongings. The path hadn't been easy or straightforward, but it had led me to a place of genuine fulfillment and growing peace, not despite the family wounds, but in some ways because of how I'd healed from them. The one-year anniversary of my promotion to director at Horizon Tech arrived with appropriate celebration. My team organized a surprise lunch, complete with embarrassing speeches and a cake decorated with binary code. The CEO stopped by to personally congratulate me, mentioning that my division's performance had exceeded projections by 23%. "Whatever you're doing, keep doing it," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. The board has noticed. Professional success had become my new normal, an achievement that still occasionally felt surreal. The side business I'd started 6 months earlier, a streamlined inventory management system for small restaurants, was gaining traction with local businesses. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was now building the very tool my family had once ridiculed me for suggesting. Sophia and I had settled into married life with surprising ease. Our small wedding the previous fall had included both our families, hers boisterous and warm, mine cautiously supportive. My father, still moving slowly but steadier than before, had shaken my hand with genuine pride. My mother had actually cried during the ceremony, her usual composed facade cracking to reveal something more authentic. "You chose well," she had whispered during our mother-son dance, nodding towards Sophia. "She sees you for who you really are." Coming from her, this was profound recognition of how invisibility had marked my childhood experience. Isabella's son James was now 8 months old, a chunky, cheerful baby who lit up whenever I appeared on video calls. My role as godfather was largely symbolic given the distance, but it represented a bridge being rebuilt between my sister and me. Miguel had made perhaps the most surprising transformation. After finally acknowledging his limitations as a restaurant manager, he'd enrolled in business courses at the local community college. Our conversations had evolved from awkward small talk to genuine exchanges about business concepts and future possibilities. The most significant change, however, came with my father's recovery. As his health stabilized, he began to reassess priorities in a way that would have seemed impossible before his heart failure. The restaurant, once the center of his identity and purpose, gradually became just one aspect of his life, rather than its totalizing focus. In early summer, I received an unexpected call from him, a rare occurrence, as our reconciliation had progressed mainly through my mother or siblings as intermediaries. "Carlos," he said, his voice stronger than it had been during my hospital visit, "I've been thinking about your software, the one for restaurants." My startup had been mentioned during family conversations, but he had never directly acknowledged it. "Yes?" I replied cautiously. "I'd like to try it. At Casa Martinez, if you're willing." The request represented a seismic shift in our relationship. He was not only acknowledging my expertise, but actively seeking at something unimaginable in our previous family dynamic. "I'd be happy to set it up," I said, keeping my tone neutral despite the emotion building in my chest. "I could fly down next weekend, install everything, train the staff. That would be good," he said, then added after a pause, "Thank you." 2 simple words that had rarely featured in our prior relationship. The weekend visit to implement my software system at Casa Martinez became a turning point. The restaurant had changed smaller in operation now, open only 5 days a week, with a streamlined menu and reduced staff. My father no longer worked in the kitchen, serving instead as host and the public face of the business, while my mother managed day-to-day operations and Miguel handled the books. As I configured tablets with the new ordering system and walked staff through inventory management procedures, I noticed my father watching from the corner booth, not with the critical scrutiny of the past, but with a kind of wondering observation, as if seeing me clearly for the first time. During a break, he beckoned me over. "Sit," he said, indicating the seat across from him. I joined him, waiting for whatever might come next. "I was wrong about many things," he began, his fingers idly tracing patterns on the tabletop. "About what success looks like, about what family means." I remained silent, giving him space to continue. "When we came to this country, I thought I knew exactly what we needed to do. Work hard. Stick together. Trust no one outside the family. Follow the plan. He shook his head slowly. I built walls to protect us, but they became a prison, especially for you. The acknowledgement was so unexpected that for a moment I couldn't respond. The heart attack was clarifying, he continued. Doctors say stress nearly killed me. And what was all that stress for? A restaurant that's half the size it once was, but actually more profitable now. A family divided by my stubbornness. Dad, I started. But he held up a hand. Let me finish. This isn't easy for me. He took a deep breath. I am proud of you, Carlos. Not because you're successful now, though you are, but because you had the courage to choose your own path when I gave you no support, no permission. That takes strength I didn't know you had. Strength I didn't have at your age. The words I had longed to hear for decades washed over me, both healing and bittersweet in their delayed delivery. Thank you, I said simply. That means a lot. Your mother and I, we've started therapy, he added, the admission clearly difficult for him. The doctor recommended it after my heart failure. Family therapy, to learn how to. He gestured vaguely, searching for words. Communicate better. Break old patterns. This revelation was perhaps the most shocking of all. My father, who had always viewed psychological support as a weakness, was voluntarily participating in therapy. That's good, I said, genuinely impressed. How is it going? Painful, he admitted with a small, rueful smile. But necessary, I think. Your mother cries a lot. I talk more than I ever have. Miguel gets angry, then apologizes. Isabella brings the baby, which helps somehow. The image of my family and therapy together confronting patterns that had damaged all of us in different ways filled me with complicated emotions. Hope, sadness for what might have been different, cautious optimism for what might still be possible. Would you consider joining us next time you visit? He asked, the question tentative, without demand or expectation. The therapist says, your perspective would be valuable, but only if you want to. Choice. He was offering me choice, the very thing that had been absent throughout my childhood. I'll think about it, I promised. And I meant it. The software installation was completed successfully, with the staff adapting quickly to the new systems. Before I left, my mother presented me with a small wrapped package. Something I should have given you long ago, she said. Inside was a faded photograph I'd never seen before, my father and mother, standing proudly in front of Casa Martinez on its opening day, their expressions a mixture of terror and determination. Written on the back in my mother's neat handwriting were the words, "Dreams change shape. Love shouldn't." We lost sight of what mattered, she explained quietly. The restaurant became everything more important than the people it was supposed to support. I'm sorry it took us so long to understand that. My flight back to Austin that Sunday was delayed, giving me time to reflect in the small regional airport. As I watched planes take off and land, I considered the journey of the past 2 years, from family scapegoat to successful professional, from emotional exile to cautious reconnection. The family I had now would never be the idealized version I had longed for as a child. The wounds were too deep, the patterns too entrenched for complete transformation. But something new was emerging from the wreckage of our old dynamics. Something more honest, more respectful, with clearer boundaries and genuine choice. Back in Austin, life continued its forward momentum. Horizon Tech offered me an executive position, overseeing multiple product lines. Sophia and I began discussing starting a family of our own. My restaurant software startup secured its first major client, outside Texas. When Isabella's invitation arrived for James's first birthday party, Sophia and I decided to attend. The gathering was small and informal, held in the backyard of my parents' house rather than at the restaurant, another subtle shift in priorities. Watching my father play awkwardly but tenderly with his grandson, seeing my mother serve cake without criticizing anyone's technique, observing Miguel engage good-naturedly with Sophia about her graphic design work. These were small miracles of family evolution. Later, as evening approached and lightning bugs began to flicker in the yard, my father joined me on the porch steps where I sat watching the scene. "Your mother tells me you and Sophia might be thinking about children soon," he said, his tone carefully conversational, rather than presumptive. "We're considering it," I acknowledged. "Maybe next year," he nodded thoughtfully. I hope he began, then paused to choose his words carefully. "I hope we can be better grandparents than we were parents. If you decide to give us that chance. One step at a time," I replied gently. "But I'm open to possibilities I wouldn't have considered before." He seemed satisfied with this answer, and we sat in companionable silence, watching the family gathering, still imperfect, still learning, but evolving in ways that would have seemed impossible when I stood locked out of my childhood home that night 2 years ago. The journey from rejection to rebuilding had taught me lessons I would carry forward. That true family supports your growth, rather than limiting it. That sometimes the people who should love you most fail catastrophically in that task. That creating boundaries isn't selfish but necessary. That success is the best response to those who underestimate you. And most importantly, that you can build a life of meaning and connection, even when your original foundation is deeply flawed. I had not only survived being kicked out, I had thrived because of it, finding strength I never knew I possessed and building connections based on mutual respect rather than obligation. The family that had once been my prison was now just one aspect of a rich, multifaceted life I had created on my own terms. As the evening wound down and goodbyes were exchanged, I felt a profound sense of completion, not because everything was perfect or healed, but because I was finally at peace with both what I had lost and what I had gained along this unexpected path. Have you ever had to walk away from something familiar to find yourself? I'd love to hear your stories of rebuilding after rejection in the comments below. If this journey of standing your ground and creating success on your own terms resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories of overcoming family struggles. Your support means everything to those of us sharing our vulnerable moments. Remember that sometimes the biggest challenges lead to the most meaningful transformations. Thank you for listening, and I wish you the courage to build the life you deserve, even when those who should support you fail to see your worth.